Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a new tactile switch, the Akko V3 Creamy Purple Pro. Let's get started. But firstly, as a disclaimer, these switches were sent to me by Akko. I wasn't paid to make this review and I will remain as impartial as I can as per usual. Anyway, enjoy the review. Now, these are short travel switches with a somewhat rounded tactile event despite what the force graph shows. Now, pricing wise, these are £9 for 45 switches on Akko's website, placing them in the budget range. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now, let's move on to the switch characteristics. On-center key presses are decently smooth with minor hints of scratchiness at very slow key presses. Off-center key presses, weirdly enough, are smoother in comparison. Maybe it's because they're tactile switches which allows them to hide minor scratchiness, although some light binding is present. Overall, these are impressively smooth and for the price they're very hard to beat. 8 out of 10. Now, according to Akko, these switches have a peak tactile force of 55 grams at 0.5 mm, an actuation force of 30 grams at 2 mm, and a bottom out distance of 3 mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, they don't actually feel like they have a super short travel. In fact, I didn't even realize it until I checked the specs. Additionally, the switches performed very consistently throughout my testing with no signs of inconsistencies anywhere. I mean, it's an Akko switch, so it isn't that surprising. Now, you might be wondering about the very light 30 gram actuation force. However, these switches don't feel light at all. The no pre-travel tactile bump makes the whole switch feel much heavier than what the numbers say. Also, and this is important, these have a very short travel for a full-size switch, so they're very easy to bottom out unlike tactile switches with a heavier actuation force like the Cherry MX Clear. Overall, I really like these switches. It's an easy recommendation for those thinking of getting into the hobby. Plus, this is a proper tactile switch without the high price tag. 9 out of 10. Now, sound-wise they're clacky, although they have some thok to them, which is an unusual trait for an Akko switch. Also, if you listen carefully, you can hear some twang, but you don't actually hear that when using them normally. Overall, they sound deeper and less clacky compared to most Akko switches, but they're still firmly in the clacky aisle. 7 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, I really enjoyed typing on these, but it did take me a while to get used to them. For whatever reason, they just felt mushy. Not in a rubber dome way, but they just aren't as snappy as I would have liked them to be. Also, they have a more rounded tactile bump, think Holy Panda X but with a significantly lighter weighting and a shorter travel. Although with that said, it is worth noting that the Holy Panda X has a rounder feel to them. But that still doesn't make these snappy, at least not in my book. They're sort of in between, I guess. Now, apart from its tactility, its performance across the board have been extremely consistent with only minor scratchiness, but zero signs of any other inconsistencies, which again is impressive for a budget switch. Overall, even though they felt mushy at first, they certainly don't feel like that anymore. These are basically an upgrade from cheap MX clones at their current price point. 8 out of 10. Now, gaming with these is quite interesting given it has a short travel. Again, I didn't even notice this, and it's good to bear in mind that a shorter travel doesn't necessarily mean it's good for gaming. So how does it perform then? Well, they're very smooth and extremely consistent in both fast and slow paced games. Its tactility is decent, especially in slower paced games, but it did have a tendency to disappear in faster paced games as with many tactile switches. I suppose the biggest downside to them was their initial mushy feeling, but if you're a newcomer you probably wouldn't notice or care about that. Although if you're more experienced, it may be a letdown. Overall, they aren't amazing or even optimal, but they're also far from unusable. These are acceptable, and given its price, I wouldn't be shocked if they were to sell out at some point. 7 out of 10. In conclusion, if you're looking for a budget, short travel tactile switch with a somewhat rounded tactile bump, then Akko has you covered. I mean, even if you're not, these are priced at 20p per switch. That's cheaper than Gatron's MX clone lineup. The final score for this switch is 39 out of 50 or 78%, which is up there with more expensive switches. And that's the end of the review. Next time I have a speed switch lined up, which will be the last one, well, at least for a while. Anyway, until then, take care and goodbye.